Well, hello everyone. It is I, your pal, J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit. Yes, that's right, an alien in a human suit. We haven't gone over that much lately, but that's still true. And as for the writer part, for those of you who are new to join us, probably nobody, I write graphic novels, short stories, and novellas, and you can find them in a link in the description. And if you don't own my books, why the fuck haven't you purchased one yet? Yeah, seriously. So anyway, as most of you know, I've been plowing headlong into boobs of steel, and who wouldn't want to plow into boobs of steel, seriously? But I've been working damn hard to get this ready to hopefully shop around to various publications. And I've got another chapter that's on the way for you guys very soon, and I've been reviewing the chapters again to post on the Discord. And as I go over this stuff, it reminds me of something Romando asked a few days ago, which was he asked me, are there any feminist Frankenstein or mad scientist type stories? And I said, yes, there were. But more to the point, they tend to coincide or cross over into a genre of feminist or suffragist utopian novels that were published between the late 1800s and early 1900s. And the thing is, these are written as supposedly being pro-women. And this is what a matriarchy would be like. And these women are serious, and it is fucking nightmarish, the shit they put in these books. It was just such a window into, no, feminism was always fucked. You know, they often say, well, the suffragists not. The suffragists were fucked up too. In fact, you know, it has always been about abuse and power. And here's the reason why, because these are the people that were shaping the movement. And in a chapter about Wonder Woman, I go into a lot about Marston and his Wonder Woman comic. And I was writing that for all of Marston's bluster about gods and goddesses and Wonder Woman owing her origins to the Greek mythology, really, his Greek mythology wasn't very good. And most of Wonder Woman really owes more of her creation to this suffragist matriarchal utopian fiction that was being published, because he read all of it. And so I thought I'd just get started with some of these, just because I figured you'd want to know. I'm even considering possibly just compiling those all into a book if you guys really want to read the nightmare. But in 1889, one of the more popular books was written by a suffragist named Elizabeth Burgoyne Corbett, and she penned a book called New Amazonia, a foretaste of the future. And it envisions the women's rights movement giving rise to a breed of highly evolved superwomen. It's set 400 years in the future after Britain sends all of its surplus females to repopulate a war-ravaged Ireland. And the novel shows how the fact that so many women are there, they outnumber the men, they take over and they transform Ireland into a socialist utopia that's vegetarian, and you know they are free of immorality and corruption and narrow-minded, self-glorifying bigotry of masculine governments. They have none of these problems. And let me tell you, this did have some influence on the idea of Marston's Paradise Island. The women of New Amazonia are superior to men in all ways, and it was not because it was gifted to them by the gods, but rather they did it through eugenics, selective breeding, infanticide, killing off infants they didn't want. And then their brilliant female scientists came up with this nerve rejuvenation process in which they are able to transfer the life force of dogs into a human female. And the women will undergo these treatments over and over again, becoming stronger and bigger until they become 7-foot-tall, muscle-bound Amazons who are immortal. And that's how they keep the men in line. And men don't get the treatment. And this was portrayed as good. This was their idea, this bizarre vegetarian socialist utopia where essentially women are draining the life force out of animals, primarily dogs, to become superwomen, and keep men in line, and the men are basically kept as children. Yeah, real pleasant stuff. There was another one called Man's Rights, or How Would You Like It, by Annie Denton Cridridge, in which she envisions a Mars being ruled by a matriarchy of a similar thing. They breed themselves into being superhuman women. And one called Mizora, A Prophecy. And that was kind of the one that all but defined the feminist utopian genre. Although it's not the first, it can be credited for the one that gave this genre most of its tropes. Scientific immaculate conception, communal living, veganism, and some vague message about a race of superwomen being created through eugenics. Basically, women controlling the births, making sure that only the superior women live and weak men survive so that they get to take over. And I don't know, it's kind of weird, is they're all socialist and they're all vegetarian, and I don't know why they're obsessed with it, but the idea of morality is non-existent. I mean, they always go on about how morally superior they are, but really what you've got is one of the most classist, stratified cultures that is just bigoted as all hell. There was another one that really influenced Marston called Angel Island by Inez Haynes Gilmore, who was the co-founder of the National College of Equal Suffragette League. And Angel Island is about these shipwrecked sailors who find an island of women, female, who are just short of heroic size, big-breasted, broad-waisted, long-limbed, and beautiful, and they're stronger than men and smarter than men in every way. And it's basically over and over again them showing how much better they are than the men. What we're supposed to take from this, I have no fucking clue. I mean, yet of all the feminist utopias that had really influenced Marston, the other one was called Herland, by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, which basically, again, you've got three adventurous young men of status and wealth going to find this legendary city in the jungle, one of these kinds of stories. And when they get there, they find that a sorceress goddess, living as a goddess, rules over it. And it's like a feminist Shangri-La. And that there they've lived without men for thousands of years, and everything's wonderful, and everyone's happy, and they're all socialists. And they've all been bred into a race of eugenically, with eugenics, against selective breeding and killing off of children. They've all become a super race of giant women who don't need men to reproduce. I just think it's really odd that these themes repeatedly come up over and over again in their fiction, and it's a window into the movement in so many fucking ways. It tells you so much about what they're about. Is their idea of utopia is this amoral, well, essentially kind of this feminist Nazi dream of breeding the super race. And that they were all so fucking big on eugenics. But of course, if you think about it, it's all about controlled births. Who gets to control the birth? You know, I don't look too happy in this picture. Let's get a happier picture of me. I've had a productive day, so let's be happy. What do you think? There. Now I look happy, don't I? There's a smile we can all look at. But yeah, I thought that was really, really bizarre. But then as the century, we got into the 19th century, or the 1900s, sorry, when we left the 1800s and went into the 1900s, more of these utopias came out. And the weird thing is in the 1800s, at least the women of these utopias were gorgeous. They were beautiful, they were youthful, and so they had the power of their good looks over men as well as the physical power. What's weird is after the 1900s, you get this shift in which their utopias, all the women start to become slender, mannish dykes, or just man-like in general. Let's see. I'm going to try and start pulling these up and going over them with you. There's one where it was a creation of the Amazons, and this was one of the ones I was thinking of, where it's a feminist Frankenstein, where this wealthy, old, bitter woman uses her wealth to create a race of genetic superwomen, and well, they're big, bulky, and mannish, and they basically move their what is their goal? Kill the men off, and somehow figure out a way to reproduce without men, as if that'll solve everything. Let's see. There's one called the Veiled Feminists of Atlantis, but that one's just goofy. Another one was called the Via the Hewitt Ray, and this is where where a woman zaps herself into another dimension where women rule, and it's the same thing. It's a socialist utopia where everything's perfect. Women reproduce asexually, and they're all waifs with short hair. They look mannish, and that's it. That's the big innovation, is how happy they all are. And there's kind of this repeated theme of, well, they've done away with the manipulation of beauty that men have imposed upon them. And without the beauty standards, they no longer feel the need to compete with one another. There's the one that's the creepiest. Now, this was not presented as a female utopian story. This was kind of a commentary on the female utopian stories. It was a criticism of, and it was written by a guy named Dr. David H. Keller. And he was a physician, he was a doctor, he did a lot of studies into hormonal glands, and he had written this story called The Feminine Metamorphosis. And this was a story that was lambasted by feminists for years and laughed at as being goofy and silly, and just showing how much this man was afraid of a liberated woman. And he tells of a world in which a very wealthy woman, and clearly it's supposed to be the woman who created, Planned Parenthood. It's supposed to be her. This wealthy woman gets these female scientists together, and they start these clinics over in China where they're kidnapping or paying men to undergo a treatment. And what they're doing is they're harvesting male hormones and then distributing them around the world to women who will inject them. And they start to grow beards and become muscular and look mannish. And once they do, they now have masculine and feminine power, and they take over the world. Because now that they have beards and muscles and look like men and can walk among us, they're naturally better than us at everything. And, well, they didn't really, the better than us part didn't work out too well, but here we are, aren't we? The harvesting of hormones and women injecting them to become more mannish. Guess he was pretty correct after all. It wasn't so funny. I don't know. That one is really fucking warped, but it hit the nail on the head. And it's amazing how many of these anti-stories that were saying, look, this is a problem and here's why, got it right. There was one by John Taine called The Ultimate Catalyst, and it's, I think, one where apparently there's a new Amazonia as well, once again, and they do it through germ warfare to exterminate men. I'm trying to see if there's any others worth mentioning. Oh, and then there was one called The Isle of Women, which was kind of like Angel Isle, where these guys get shipwrecked on an island of Amazons, and it's a socialist utopia. But in this one, they really beat the crap out of the men. But anyway, yeah, I guess that fills about 20 minutes of the show. Margaret Sanger, thank you. But what do you guys think of this? Just this window into all the way back into the late 1800s, early 1900s, the suffragettes were just as fucked up, bigoted, and amoral as today's feminists. They were just as messed up. This whole idea that, well, the suffragists were reason. No, they weren't. No, this is what they were. They were still vegetarians. They were still socialists. They were all basically wannabe dictators who had genocidal desires. Yeah, you nailed it, Wolf. Men never dream of slaughtering women. But there are so many of these stories where they use germ warfare to exterminate men, or they become superhuman somehow and kill men, just outright kill them. But yeah, what does that say about the morals of this movement, and why people were concerned, and that they were always fucking screwed up? Seriously. But the other thing that I notice is this craving for power and them outright saying what they would do with that power. You know? I mean, could you imagine a men's movement where they basically say, well, when we come into power, we're basically going to enslave and kill. We're going to kill most of the women and enslave the rest of them and use them as broodmares. Why are they filled with such hatred? Well, that's a very good question, because all of these women, and I do mean every woman who wrote one of these, was an aristocrat. They were wealthy women with money and privileged lives. They didn't have to work. They didn't have to worry about raising their own kids. They had lots of free time, and this is what they did with it. Geez, I'm guessing I'm right that the 19th Amendment was a mistake. The first thing women do is get rid of responsibility to their children and kill them. Yeah, that is the repeated theme, is that they would use infanticide, not even abortion, just infanticide to get rid of kids that they didn't want. And I don't know, the soullessness of the whole thing, and the lack of any sort of moral center, and yeah, lack of responsibility. That's another common thing in all of these stories, is someone else raises their kids. In their perfect society, they pop the kid out and then someone else raises it, or they have some sort of artificial womb that does, that basically the baby comes out full grown and fine and they don't need to do anything. And these were being written by women who were for want of nothing. I mean, it's not like these were like working class women who slaved all day in a mine, or was spending their entire time raising kids and standing over a stove, which were both things women had to do. Yeah, a lot of women actually were mining, believe it or not. These were written by, again, wealthy aristocrat women who didn't have to do anything. They wanted for nothing. They were privileged in every way. Unlike their husbands, they didn't even have to work. You're fuming about all this, Wolf? The feminazi and trans movement are pretty much a violent fantasy. Yeah, and look how violent both of them are. Absolutely. Unless my ex is gone and I didn't have family, I was turning them over. Yeah. I am so glad my mom wasn't brainwashed by these broads. You're one of the few. It's amazing how many baby boomer chicks or women who, again, came from spoiled households, had went to college, and just thought they were entitled to the fucking world, and became the shittiest moms ever. Okay, going over your comments. But yeah, I find it interesting that it's always Marxism, socialism, veganism, and eugenics. Always. Going over your comments. So yeah, I don't know if you guys even want it, but I've toyed with the idea of, I could gather these all up into an anthology just as a look, here it is. This is what they thought. They were always fucked up. And that's the thing. You don't ever come across these feminist writers ever writing a utopia that was actually, reasonable or actually utopian. They were always vicious. Of course, the communist utopian fiction was written by the most laziest and privileged of leftists. Yeah, basically. I think it's important for history, Grant, that I'm a context hoe and love knowing about it. Yeah, the thing is that while these books were all read by the wealthy suffragists of the era, none of these books lasted. I mean, aside from academics in colleges, nobody cared. None of these really are survived. And the only reason anyone gives a fuck about them anymore is their place in the women's suffragist movement and feminist fiction. Feminists like reading them. That's it. And so they can say, well, see, women wrote books too. Yeah, and they're pretty awful. I mean, they're only read by the people who really got off on this sick shit. Maybe they don't understand society and humanity because being privileged enough is like growing up in a Skinner box. No utopia is reasonable. It literally means impossible place. Exactly. If you did make an anthology, I would like to see it go to liberal institutions and feminist bookstores. They probably would sell it. They probably would like it. But yeah. So there's your answer. If I come across anything else, I'll let you know. But there's your answer, Bromando. And yeah, the other thing is none of these women are very good writers. What is it with commies, socialists, fascists, and feminists almost always having privileged upbringings? Because you have to be really, really privileged and sheltered to think that kind of shit would work, or think you're entitled to that kind of crap. Super Mario Kart took a massive dump and missed the last 15 minutes of the stream. Well, that's the kind of the important part of the stream. I'm just kind of rambling now. There's not much more to say at this point. I'm just kind of curious what you guys thought of all this. Getting money from the feminists, I guess the Bible's right. The wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. But why is there such this craving for lack of accountability, lack of responsibility in feminist and women's the women's movement? Anything they write, anything, it's always, I don't want to be held accountable for this. I don't want to be judged. Why? The whole thing about power is it also requires responsibility, and that when you're given rights, there's also responsibility. And when there is no responsibility is when it becomes disastrous. As Kat was pointing out to me, what are these chicks always saying? Don't judge me. No, I'm going to judge you. You're a whore. Is that simple? No, you're a dumb whore. That's that simple. You flash your tits on OnlyFans for money. You're a whore. I'm going to judge you. These privileged people love Karl Marx because he was one of them. The entire Communist Manifesto is written from the perspective of someone who never had to lift a finger to do anything. Very true. And who also had genocidal fantasies. I think it's when you've been victimized, legitimately, it puts it in a stupid headspace. So you are not taking responsibility. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading that wrong. I'd be curious what reviews would be from feminists if you did put the anthologist. I bet it'd be an interesting experiment. Well, the curious thing is I've seen reviews from feminists on these stories, and they're usually all for it. That's the thing. And there's one I had mentioned but didn't talk about, and it was a story called The Veiled Feminists of Atlantis. And it's hailed as this great feminist work, but I read it the other night, and it's like, did you guys all miss the fucking point? The story is, as it goes, is that on Atlantis, they were this ultra advanced civilization, and women demanded equal rights, and the men said, okay. And then women who had been veiled at the time stopped wearing their veils. And some people didn't like it, but most of the guys were like, okay, don't care. Yeah, take your veils off. We don't care. And as time went on and women became equal and came into society and were in politics, a feminist faction took to wearing the veils again. And they took to wearing the veils because that way, when they were in public and specifically in politics, no one could ever see their face when they were talking, which made it very hard to tell when they were being honest and when they were lying. When they were being disingenuous, you could never see their face. And also, because you could never see their face, when they took the mask off, they wouldn't be held accountable. No one would know who it was. And the men of Atlantis said, no, you've used this to take advantage. You've used this to take advantage of us. You've become, it's no longer equal. You've used this to take power. And now there's becoming an imbalance. We agreed to equality, not just a reverse of what it was before. And the women laughed and said, well, too fucking bad. We're in charge now. And it culminates in basically men saying, we'd rather see it burn than be slaves. And they wage a massive war that ends up sinking Atlantis. And the women would never compromise and remove the veils. And it ultimately results in the total destruction of their civilization. And this is hailed as some feminist work. It's like, what are you, fucking morons? It's pretty obvious what the moral of this story is. I don't know. Look at Mao, Stalin, Kim, Castro did to their countries with communist ideology. Yeah, well, for that matter, look at what's going on in Europe right now as they all start to lean left. If I can't have it, no one can is their whole mantra. Yeah. I don't know. Yes, Ishii, they are morons. Yeah. Or Vosh. So otherwise, aside from just kind of giving you a rundown of this and me quickly approaching putting another chapter up for you guys to read for Boobs of Steel, this one will be around 10,000 words. What's going on your end? What's going on with you guys? Give me something to talk about. Seriously, give me something to talk about. I mean, I've been reading a lot of pulps for you guys, getting anthologies together. And, what's interesting is the repeated theme throughout the 20th century. Throughout the 20th century of fantasy, horror, and science fiction, of women suddenly being given power and totally abusing the shit out of it and having no concept of responsibility. Notice that they always write them in as dunderheads and can't do anything right, when in reality men would dismantle the idiocy real fast. Yeah, absolutely. Which is why they have to write in kind of stupid gimmies like, well, we're draining the life essence out of dogs so that we can become 7-foot tall, muscle-bound goddesses that can beat the crap out of men and rape them. Hell, there's one that came out recently called The Power, I believe, where it was women suddenly one day get the ability to shoot lightning bolts. and instantly take over society, and the electrical powers can make them so that they can force men to get erections, so that they can rape men, and this is considered a female empowerment story. It's like, no, nothing's changed. You guys are sociopathic pieces of shit. Have you seen the trailer for Meg 2, The Trench? Don't know anything about it. Let's see, Meg 2, The Trench. Okay, I'm looking at the trailer right now. Don't have any sound. Well, CGI is decent. For 65 million years. I don't even know about the first Meg. Is there something I need to know? Okay, so we got a dinosaur coming out of the water. Got a shark eating the dinosaur. I'll talk about it later. I have no idea. I know nothing about it, Owen. To give a woman power is like to give a gun to a monkey. Is the truest joke I've ever written. I could tell you the story of how I got fired from a security company for not doing work, despite the fact that they never gave me any work. Shit. The power is lightning based, once again illustrating how few women understand how electricity works. Oh God. For the women listening to this show, I know that you're the ones that are the I don't know, would we say the anomaly, or the what is it, the right end of the margin? And that it must be miserable to be associated with all these other women who are just fucking morons. I mean, seriously, like Claire, I mean, this really must be fucking annoying to you. I'm sure this drives you up the wall. Or Humble Marty, I'm sure that's the same thing. I'm sure this is really fucking annoying. I mean, women in the chat, yeah. I mean, how is it for you watching what women have done with all their rights? It's okay to say it, Ishi. We had fathers in our lives. Yeah, I bet that. Yeah, hate to say it, but Ursula K. Le Guin stuff tended to go in that direction in some stories, which is why I had a hard time getting into her works, especially her one book where about purple teddy bear aliens. Well, apparently at one time she was the one who was the feminist who wasn't like that, who called bullshit. And then when it became convenient, she changed her opinion. When I heard the premise for The Power, I decided Isiri Yatsura is better, and I have been collecting episodes for years. Feminists essentially want to be the oppressors they claim to be against. Yeah, and the oppression they claim to be suffering doesn't exist. Okay. I live in a blue state, Claire says. Very much so. Marv, feminists want to have the rights of men, but the duties of neither men or women. Yeah, that's true. These commie writers couldn't even write an episode of Danger Mouse. Going through here, Ishi, the women that have feminist powers hate real women. Yeah, that's true. They hate breasts and beauty. They hate to see women. They hate breasts and beauty. They like to see women disfigure their body. It's sad to see these days promote woke culture. Yeah. And what's curious also is I was going over a section. I'm doing kind of a comprehensive history of the Amazonian archetype and its place in Western culture. And when I got into the Pulp era, I was talking about the influences that came from artist Margaret Brundage, who did basically all the really good cover art in the 30s for Weird Tales magazine. And her art pretty much redefined the artwork on those magazines in general. All these other artists started imitating the stuff she was doing. And what's interesting is that Brundage was very much into BDSM. It's very clear she was into BDSM. Um, and a lot of her covers have heavy sadomasochistic tones. And what was interesting was at the time, social conservatives really didn't have an issue with the fact that there were half-naked women on the covers of Weird Tales. They had a problem with the sadomasochistic themes that were on the covers because they were being displayed in newsstands. Conversely, the leftists of that era hated her artwork because the women all had breasts. And they specifically complained that all of her women look like wet nurses and it's disgusting. Yeah. So yeah, what is it with the left hating titties? You know, seriously, what is it about a stacked woman that make leftists so damn mad? Okay. Modern day feminism is the result of a lack of fathers in their lives. And the thing is, though, and the lack of fathers in their lives is due to feminism, because in the 70s, all the boomer feminists were really pushing for divorce. Don't, you know, they were the ones that pretty much destroyed marriage, which is weird because all those women did have fathers in their lives and they were spoiled princesses. Actually, getting back, actually, the vast majority of the feminists of the 70s who were really famous that were anti-marriage were all wealthy New York chosen people. So take of that what you will. I read the intro to Boobs of Steel today. Looking forward to reading chapter 1. Excellent. Um, Talking about movies that copied Madagascar, I don't know. Going through here. The feminine ideal is the enemy they feel they should be able to destroy. Honestly, I think where that anti-feminine ideal came from, again, goes back primarily, because I did the research, it really does go back primarily to a bunch of wealthy Manhattan spoiled rich girls who weren't that. They were all, you know, kind of chubby brunettes, and they hated the what is it? The hourglass figured blondes and redheads, I guess, was the hatred. And they especially hated blondes, especially. They didn't like redheads either, but they especially hated blondes. And that's why they've had a hate boner for Barbie for 60 years now. It's always freaking New Yorkers. Yeah, it is actually. And it's not just New York, it's specifically Manhattan. And there's a number of reasons why it was Manhattan, partially because that's where the publishing is centered. And it's a very insular community. There are people in Manhattan who never leave Manhattan, and they think that that's the entire fucking world. They have no concept of how people live outside Manhattan. They hate blondes because gentlemen prefer them. You know what's interesting about that? And that may or may not be true. But as I dig more and more through the pulps, it seemed to me that really, yeah, there was an interest in blondes, but most of these writers preferred busty redheads even more. And it's kind of interesting that it's always remembered as, oh, they all wanted blondes. And while blondes were, it kind of took a second place to redheads. Redheads were the ones that they wanted most. And often in these stories, it's a redhead. Of course, that might just because Irish people were writing these, or Irish Americans were writing a lot of these stories. All those leftist belief systems stem from jealousy. Cancel culture is what happens when you take the power away from the pimps and give it to the haters. Yeah. No wonder all these feminists are obsessed with Harley Quinn. Yeah. Oh, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, the movie. Yeah, of course. So another one that I would bring up that's kind of interesting is, I've mentioned this before, but the whole notion that curvaceous, busty women were not popular in the 1920s is bullshit. And that is another myth that needs to die. When you go through pulp magazines, going all the way back to 1910 and 1920, there were cheesecake magazines that were aimed towards working class men. And let me tell you, the magazines that working class men were looking at, the nudies, the cutie nudies, those women were busty and round hipped and tight waist just as much as they are now. They always liked the same thing. It was, again, the wealthy aristocrats and the leftists and the all the basically the woke type people of the 20s that were engaging in drugs and weird LGBTQ sex and cross-dressing. It was that whole crowd, the whole cabaret crowd that was engaging, who were into flappers. And it was the wealthy who were into flappers. The common man weren't interested in that. The women they wanted to have sex with looked like the women we want to have sex with now. And how men have always wanted women they want to have sex with. Round hips, big tits, done. Let's see if I can find something I can share. Okay. They also seem to like having animal men, aliens, or monsters, or beast folks, mostly lions or cats themed, as love interests or having relationships, while they mock any male author who tried that. Yeah. Fiery, hot-headed redheads, often tomboys. Yeah, true. That is absolutely true. That's the other thing, is this whole idea that the pulps were full of damsels back then is bullshit. There were damsels, but there were plenty of kick-ass women too. So I don't know what the fuck they were talking about. Another one is, we're always told over and over again about how racist those books were. Some of them were. I'll be honest. Some of them had some views that we would consider backward or bigoted, but not horrible. Nothing that you'd want to kill anybody over. It was kind of bigoted. But it's kind of interesting how many of these stories, interracial relationships are popping up. And it's okay. One of the stories there's actually been a couple now that I've come across where men with Chinese and Japanese wives, while there was a stigma attached, were portrayed as the hero, which is interesting. I mean, we don't, it's never, ever portrayed like that. It's always, everyone was white and they just wanted white and they didn't. No. Heck, even the Max Fleischer Lois Lane would fight bad guys. Yeah, that was part of her appeal back in the day before she became a cunt. The old Lois was really feisty. Whenever I hear about things are racist and bigoted, they always feel exaggerated to the extreme. And they are. They usually are. Or the most bigoted shit is coming from leftists. My God, communist H.G. Wells was a real big fucking racist. Never hear about that. Of course, Karl Marx himself said we needed to exterminate the black race or enslave them. So make of that what you will. Modern woke Hollywood hated redheads because they're associated with European. Funny because red hair and blonde people in the Middle East and Australia, maybe the redheads are aggressive. No, I've talked about that. That it's my theory that it's all that the redhead back in the day used to be code for working class because Celts were all working class, and if a woman had red hair, she was almost always a working class woman, even if she was really hot. It meant she came from working class background. So I find it interesting that nowadays, if they're going to race swap anyone, it's going to be the redhead. Remember her fending off train robberies with a Tommy gun? Never trust the official history. Feminists absolutely hate tomboys. Tomboys are everything feminists pretend to be, but never actually can achieve. Yeah, that is a thing about feminism too, is that the feminists want the prestige and the glory and all the things that come with hard work, but they don't ever actually want to put in the effort or take the responsibility or any of the hard part. Well, why, thank you, Tweldy. I'm glad you appreciate it. Please, if you can, drop in and give it a review. Marv Alice, black people used to be working class. They're mostly underclass now. Yeah, there actually was a period in which the average black American was earning more than the average Irish American, and that crime stats were worse for the Irish at one point, but that is completely swapped. I hate what they've done to tomboys too, buddy. I knew it. Nothing about Marxism is good for the black community or anybody else. No. One thing you're going to find is you read through Boobs of Steel, everything, and I do mean everything that comes up, anything bad, it always roots back to fucking communism. It's amazing. I didn't expect that. But it inevitably always traces back to communism. I received scars and case file from a former member of our group. I'll do a video review. A former member? Who would that former member be? Just curious. Some underclass people make a lot of money. Class is mostly social, but economic stuff is a result of your class, not the cause of it. Karl Marx, Senator Armstrong. My source is that I made it the fuck up. Hey, other than the fact that he went a little too far and went a little too apeshit, McCarthy was right. Almost in every case, he was right. Marxism is a cancer. It really is. Marxism is cultural poison. You want a way to kill off a civilization, embrace Marxist and socialist views. That's it. You want to destroy a community? Marxism. You want to destroy art? Marxism. You want to make something suck? Marxism. Partially because it's rooted in the concept of, hey, all of your stuff should belong to me. I should have right to your stuff. You don't deserve anything because you're successful. You're the enemy, and there's no such thing as right and wrong or morals, just power. Okay. It's interesting. The women on my mom's side of the family are much more working class and tomboyish, whereas my dad's side seemed to be inclined to be collectivist ideology and frankly a bit stuffy. Yeah. Well, I think part of the thing with communism and the reason why wealthy people get into communism is because they have the convenience to. I mean, you have to be really that, totally disconnected and start wanting for nothing to start thinking, oh, well, we live in abundance. We should all share and do this. You have to be in a sheltered, spoiled environment to even assume that would work or that that's a good idea. Anyone who's actually had to work for their money or for what they have in life, don't think that. Commies are lazy idiots. Hell, they don't even want to do the fighting for themselves. I mean, when I was in college, and this also was the same in the 60s, apparently. All the communists were convinced, all the college communists were convinced they would be the vanguard, the intellectual elite who would be leading the revolution. And they were convinced the blacks and the Mexicans would do all the fighting for them. Because that's another thing about communism. They never do their own fighting. They're going to have some poor son of a bitch die for them. Hell, most old school Japanese antagonists were essentially Marxists trying to rule the planet, especially in Tatsunoko Productions. Yeah. And it's interesting is that for a while, a lot of the people in anime were college communists until they realized they had confused communism with collectivism and that it's not the same thing and that communism's a nightmare. Communism, the ideology for rich losers who want to be the stereotype of absolute monarchies. Yeah. Okay, going through here. Yeah, communists are massively racist. All right, well, I've been on for an hour. Hopefully you found this enjoyable. 20 minutes of informative information and then me rambling and talking to your comments. Don't know when we'll be on the air next, probably Monday. But you have a good evening, you have a good weekend. And again, if you want to buy any of my books, link is in the description. All right, good night, everyone.